So I posted this photo on Instagram during the Q&A session when somebody asked what was the moment that sparked or created a catalyst that got you started in the firearms industry, that got you interested in pursuing firearms or guns and training with it. And when I did, and I gave like a really short caption story about behind what happened, I wasn't expecting to get as many questions as I got. So I figured I'd do a quick story time for you guys and share about my experience and what happened there that ultimately led me to want to get into firearms in general. Now, this is going to be a part of a series that I wanted to do for a while, which is lessons from the mission field. So things that I've learned from doing mission work across the world and even here stateside. And just little things that I think that would help all of us in our EDC or just life in general. So I'm going to share those. We'll break those up into different episodes. And I wasn't planning on starting with this, but since I got so many questions, I figured we'd start here, and that'll kind of give you some backstory to some of the things that you'll see in the future in future videos. As most of you know, I was a pastor for 5 years, was a head pastor and church planner. And as a part of that, we did work with church plants and other churches around the world and in the US, different ministries. So we went to Alexandria, Egypt, and we were working with a church plant there. And that was the first big like eye-opening experience for me as far as my need and desire to get into firearms and to start taking other things more seriously. So my buddy Dave and I, Dave is actually here, but he didn't want to be in the video for whatever reason. So he went with me, and he goes with me on most of my trips. So you'll see him in a lot of the photos. But we traveled to Egypt to go work with a church plant there. They were working on planting other churches and reaching the next generation in that area. So that's what we went there to go do. We were there for a few weeks. We had a long travel. You know, it took us 20-ish hours to get there. We had some long layovers in between, and we were exhausted. And we actually got there right around sun up. We got into town, and we were both just exhausted. So we took a nap. And we slept till about the afternoon. Our first night there was actually the beginning of Ramadan. So it was the first night that the fast was going to break at sundown. So people were, you know, tired, cranky, hungry, thirsty. For those of you who don't know about Ramadan, they fast typically, traditionally, they fast throughout the day. They don't eat or drink so long as the sun is up, or at a certain time. They will break the fast and then have a huge celebration throughout the night. So that was the case, and what actually woke us up from our nap, what woke me up from the nap, was the sounds of gunfire. And I wasn't sure if it was gunfire or fireworks because we knew that a party was coming that night, and we weren't sure what was going on in the streets. So I go up and I, kind of look around to see in the flat that we're in. The flat we're in is probably on like the fifth or sixth floor. And so I started making my way out to the balcony where our translator Mina was, and he was out there and he was on the phone. So I asked him what was going on, and he said very nonchalantly, he's just chilling, leaning up against the balcony. He's like, "Oh, don't come over here. They're shooting." And so I kept walking. I was like, okay, he's like being very relaxed about it, not a big deal. And he says, no, I'm being serious. Stay over there. It's too dangerous for you to come over here. And I was like, what? So he's like, well, you can come stand behind this pillar and you can look over there in the corner and see what's going on, but just stand here for cover. And I was like, this is real. Like, this is really happening. Like, this is not a dream. This is not a joke. There is actually a shooting going on right now. And so I sat there and I watched this event continue to unfold. And I see people scattered across the floor, hiding, ducking behind cars, running into the little corner shops, ducking behind tables, and there's blood on the streets, and there's people being carried away and thrown into the back of like little donkey carts and fruit carts and trucks, and they're being taken away. And meanwhile, Mina's on the phone trying to talk to others in the area about what's going on. And eventually the scene stops, it calms down, and we watched as they, tended to those that were injured there and who had been wounded, and eventually cleared them off. And then within a matter of like 10 or 15 minutes, it was gone. Everything was done. They had moved everybody out of there, and they take some of like the dirty water from the fish that are on display on ice that had melted throughout the day. They take that water and they started washing blood off the streets and continue to just clean up and act as if nothing happened. And I remember distinctly turning to Mina and going, okay, so where are the ambulances? Where are the police? Or was like a news channel going to show up? Like, does the military come? Like, what's going on? How come nothing's going on here? And he says, well, this is how life is here. It's what it is. We don't have great hospitals, so all they're going to do is tell you to have bed rest and take some aspirin. So they're just going to go do that at home, and we'll have to try to come to some sort of solution and figure out. And he's like, and news channels don't cover this because it makes the city look bad. And there's not. He's like, we don't really have police or ambulances that come over here. It was that moment that was the catalyst for me to realize and start taking things seriously, like my training. One, I knew I wanted to get a gun and I wanted to start training with it. Two, I knew I needed to take my physical fitness seriously because of watching them carry people out of there. I was sitting there thinking, I was like, Dave's in the other room asleep. If something happens, can I carry Dave 4 city blocks? Like if something started happening, would we be able to run for however long we needed to get away from the threat? Now, being a former, athlete in soccer and cyclist, I knew I had the endurance to do it, but it's just like, but would I have the strength or endurance to help someone else in need? And then also realizing, there was nobody to tend to them medically. So would I be able to tend to somebody's wound or my own wounds should something happen? And that, like, for me was like an eye opener, and it was kind of like just opened up this whole new world of, okay, I need to start venturing into all these things. And a lot of what I learned is what I want to share over the course of the series. And it's going to give you guys some insight into like my EDC and like the way I do recon when I go out of the country or to go stay in a different city. Things like situational awareness that I've learned, blending into your environment. So, and again, I'm not claiming to be an expert, a subject matter expert on any of these things. It's just lessons I've learned and things I've learned from other people who travel like that and carry out mission trips or operations in other places. Now, there's a ton of great resources out there. There's guys who are way more knowledgeable, but this is simply my experience and things that I've learned from other people in a position where I'm a civilian, because most of us are civilians. And when we travel, whether it's to another state, another city, or across the world, we're traveling as civilians. We're not going there to carry out operations. We don't have the support of the government or some agency or whatever. So everything that I'm going to talk about is with that in mind, right? That you are kind of on your own or your small little group of people that you're going with. So that's where I think it may differ a little bit, and just want to share some insight on that. But to kind of close out that story and what happened at the end of the day, I asked Mina, Mina's like, hey, we're going to have some clan meetings. Mina's dad was the actual head of their clan. And so they gathered all the local clans and they tried to diffuse the situation. But at the end of the day, the 2 men that started the incident, which ultimately happened because they were cranky, they were hungry, and they were thirsty, waiting for the fast to break. And a little fender bender turned into a bigger event where they got out, started yelling, pushing and shoving. Eventually, somebody pulled a knife, somebody pulled out a gun, and the other guy went to the truck and got an AK. And that's where so many people got shot. Like 50-ish people got shot or injured in that incident. And it's just a situation that continued to escalate. And Mina said that ultimately what would happen is that they would have the clans try to defuse the situation. They couldn't come to an agreement. So the 2 warring clans decided it was blood revenge. So they would wait to see how many people died from the incident, and then they would then set out to take blood revenge on the other. And he says this has been going on between those 2 clans specifically, but in that region for hundreds of years. So it's unfortunate, but it's the reality that other people in the world live in. And as I remember coming back from that trip thinking, us as Americans and and especially specifically the American church, we live in an unprecedented season of prosperity where the church hasn't really been persecuted like it has in other countries. And we don't see a lot of the violence like we see in other countries. And I think that it was, for me, a realization that it's just a matter of time before it comes here. Because no civilization, no big country or world power has lasted forever without falling or having some sort of turmoil. And I think we've started to see more of that with protests recently and a lot of the division in our country. And as terrorism slowly creeps in and then the war on drugs at the border comes in, we just face a lot of threats. And I think you'll slowly start to see an increase in danger and violence locally as well as abroad. So for me, it was like, okay, now I've got to start preparing for when that comes here. I know it's not here now. Doesn't mean I need to wait until it comes here. I can use this time to prepare myself and help prepare others so that when that time does come, we're not sheep into the slaughter. So hope that makes sense. And we'll talk more about that trip specifically and then some other trips that I've taken, and I'll show you guys some photos. It's always hard to share photos and videos from those areas because there's a lot of stuff we can't capture, or if we try to capture them, whether it's through photo or video, it kind of draws a lot of attention to us, and we don't necessarily want to do that. So, but I'll share as much as I can, show you guys some of that. If you have questions about that trip or things you're interested in, leave them in the comments down below. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe, karate chop that bell so you get notified every time I upload a video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.